I'm the bad guy. I'm the
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Across the Gridiron. I am Matt, and I am here once again to break down this last weekend's NFL action with my friend and yours, Eddie Equo. Eddie, we're a little bit late out this week, only by about 3 or 4 days. So apologies for all that. But Eddie, my good friend, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah, like you said, we're a little bit late with this one, but I promise you it's going to be good.
No, don't promise what you can't deliver, Eddie.
Oh, well, I mean, we always deliver, don't we? In our own, special style.
In our own special way, we deliver a little bit, yes.
Yeah. It's been an interesting couple of days because obviously now we're speeding away to Christmas. I know you've got holiday plan. I've also got time off as well. So, it's that kind of time where we want to spend as much time with the family as possible. So there's lots of prep, going towards that. But of course, football is still on, and we're still excited about what week 14 has delivered and what that means for the playoffs, because it's getting very, very crazy. Like Alex Ferguson used to say in our football, it's squeaky bum time.
Well, there's an expression that all our American viewers are going to really understand. But an interesting fact about that, right?
Yeah.
There's you that he actually didn't say squeaky bum time.
Right? No, he did, really?
Squeeze your bum time.
Oh, is that what he said?
And it almost came out in his Scottish brogues, squeaky bum time, and it's just remained squeaky bum time. But I like the fact that we were already 2 minutes in and we've already completely derailed this entire episode today. So yeah, we're actually so we're recording this on a Thursday. So we're going to review the last week's action when the next weekend action is kind of starting today. So this is as late as we get, and people who are regular viewers of this DAFT channel that we've created again, I might see a few odd episodes, a few changes to our regular programming over the course of the next couple of weeks, because we're not going to be able to do our regular picks and previews episodes. So this week it might just be me doing it because you're otherwise engaged, and then when I go away for work Christmas parties, Eddie, you're going to potentially do one on your own as well. So I think this is going to be interesting to see. I mean, we need to find some kind of competition because I'm already so far ahead of the predictions. Maybe when it comes to the previews, we'll just see who gets the most views between me and you, right?
Yeah,
that can be
maybe that's what happens. But I mean, listen, we're gonna have to start doubling the points,
No. Because you've been doing surprisingly well the last couple of weeks, Eddie. You finally at week 14, 13 come into your own.
Listen, I'm playoff Eddie, right? I wait to the playoffs. That's when the magic kicks in. Some teams like to peak early, like the Colts. So we're going to talk about that. And then,
well, the thing is, Eddie, you haven't peaked at all. You're so far out of the race to the playoffs. It's like you said, yes, I'm going to be playoff ready when you're 0-10 going after Thanksgiving. But anyway, we digress. We're not here to talk about your piss poor predictions. What we're here to talk about is week 13. If any of you can still remember what actually happened in week 14. Bloody, I can't even get that right. Week 14. Now, what we tend to do normally is we just pick a handful of games, we focus on them. But I think as we're now looking at, as we're so close now to getting towards the playoffs, things are getting really interesting. Well, that's what we think they're interesting anyway, hence why we're doing podcasts on it. We're going to maybe go around the divisions, right? And we're going to pick out some of the key talking points in the games from all the divisions, and certainly the stuff that matters, or what Eddie thinks matters anyway. So we're going to start in the NFC, and we're going to start, as always, we may as well get it out the way. We're going to start Cowboys corner, and we'll talk about the NFC East. Now, this wasn't a great weekend for the NFC East. If I look at the streak for all the teams, Eagles lost 3, Cowboys lost 1, Commanders lost 8, Giants lost 7. It really is. It's the place to be at the moment in the season. But this was again. But let's start with your beloved Eagles first, because their slide continues. Lost Monday Night Football. They lost 22-19 away to the LA Chargers. And if it wasn't for the Cowboys also losing, but on Thursday night, the Eagles would be in deep trouble in terms of whether their playoff place can hold on. So the Eagles lost, but obviously what we saw before that on Thursday night was the Dallas Cowboys losing in a very a typically high scoring game of 44-30 to the Detroit Lions. They couldn't take advantage. So Eddie, just let's look at these two games to start with. It's a bit of a daft question, but where would you like to start?
Let's start with the Eagles.
Okay, fair enough. That wasn't what I was expecting.
Because you know how I love to talk about the Eagles. I mean, this team is they're beginning to almost start to have a pattern in terms of the way that they behave. You know, they go to the Super Bowl one season, the next season they fall off a cliff. Then they go to the Super Bowl the next season, and then the next season after that they fall off a cliff because they are, you know, doing their best impressions of the Eagles of 2023. This was the team that started hot 10-1 and then lost their last 5 out of 6 games, you know, and went into the playoffs and got absolutely dumped in the first round of the playoffs. And they've started again, you know, started incredibly well. At least this time they didn't even get to 10 wins. And then they started losing, you know, losing to the Cowboys. They've lost to the Chargers. And it's not so much the fact that they are losing, because the NFL is a difficult league, and you know, week to week, you know, any team can lose, you know, from a field goal, you know, a block punt, you know, or something crazy happening. But this game was all about Jalen Hurts. And you kind of know how I feel about, you know, Jalen Hurts. And, you know, it's very difficult to argue when someone has got a Super Bowl ring and was, named the Super Bowl MVP. But I just, and someone gave a good analogy of Jalen Hurts, which I really, really like. And I think it was someone on Fox News and Fox Sports, and he was likening Jalen Hurts to Russell Wilson. You know, a quarterback that went to 2 Super Bowls, lost one, won the other. Even though Russell did it the other way, so he won the first one, lost the second one. Jalen lost the first one, you know, won the second one. But their run to winning the Super Bowl was almost tainted with, was it them or was it the running back? And if you remember, for Russell Wilson, it was beast mode. Marshawn Lynch, you know, who was the running back for the Seattle Seahawks, you know, at that time, and he was just unstoppable. You know, Seattle Seahawks went into the Super Bowl and they won. And then if you remember, we talked about it when we were talking about the Patriots game, you know, what happened in that second, Super Bowl with the Patriots, where the coach should have ran the ball with Marshawn and then decided to pass it. And then Malcolm Butler, you know, got the interception and the Patriots won that Super Bowl. And, you know, Jalen Hurts' run to the Super Bowl and win of the Super Bowl, you could argue, was on the back of Saquon Barkley, you know, a large proportion of it. You know, so there's been now questions about, you know, has Jalen Hurts actually built enough credit to have a poor season or a bad run of games? Because every quarterback has it. Mahomes is having it right now, and there's nobody that is going to say that Mahomes is not a good quarterback. Matthew Stafford, you know, had it the other game, you know, when they lost and against the Panthers of all teams, you know, and nobody would say that Matthew Stafford is not a good quarterback. In fact, I think he's still, you know, favorite to win the MVP. You know, so having bad games is not, you know, it's not disastrous. But Jalen Hurts hasn't been looking good, you know, throughout the whole season. So when you now have a game where you turn over the ball 5 times in one game, including an interception in the last play of the game when you're driving, in overtime to potentially win or tie the game. You can't afford to throw an interception when you're within that 15-yard line, almost in the end zone, which is exactly what they did. So there's problems in the Eagles, and they may get out of it, but they're not playing like a team that's going to get out of it. And what that means is that with every loss that they've had, they're pulling, other teams. One, they were the number one seed, in the NFC, and now that has gone. They're now sitting at the number three seed, and of all the teams, that are up there, you've got, they're the ones that have had the most losses now. So you've got teams. So it begs to reason that even if they get into the playoffs, they might be one and done, right? Because of the form that they are taking into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I suppose the only difference is you could say you can look at when it comes to the playoffs. You said yourself they've been to Super Bowl twice, right? So they've navigated the playoffs before, and a lot of these teams in there. And we'll talk. I want to touch on probably towards the end of the episode is just how it's looking at the moment in terms of the teams who are actually in the playoffs and how exciting it is. There's lots of new teams there, but but the Eagles are the only team. Well, are probably the team who have been there the most, right? They've got a team who can get there, but you're right. They've been poor, haven't they? They just Hurts, Barkley, they look shadows of the players they were last season. The offense just hasn't clicked into gear at all. And they were playing a team against the LA Chargers, who are still very much in playoff contention themselves in the AFC, despite the fact that they're not top of their division. But things are looking good. I mean, they're going in with zero confidence, but there's 4 regular games left, right? At the moment, they are 2 games ahead of the Cowboys. Yeah. So they are still in pole position. So let's come on to the Dallas Cowboys now, because, you guys lost on Thursday. You lost again, another big shootout against the Detroit Lions. So it was all basically the Eagles could have wrapped up the NFC East if they had beat the Rams, but of course they didn't. Are you now looking into this because you were on such a good run of form? This defeat, I think, for Lance was a bit of a kick in the teeth, or a wake up call, or whatever you want to talk about, or however you want to say it. It proves again that the defense probably just isn't strong enough. But how would you look at things going? You're 2 games behind the Eagles with only 4 remaining.
Yeah, and it's the hope that kills, right? With the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, it's very difficult, when you want to have a run of games, and the Cowboys are going to look back at the game against the Cardinals, right? Arizona, which are not a good team, losing that game and then losing the Panthers. Maybe the Panthers won not such a bad loss now when you consider what the Panthers have gone ahead to do, in the last couple of weeks. But maybe that Arizona game, the Cowboys will be looking at it and thinking to themselves, how did we lose that game? Because if they had won that game, the Lions is a game that you can lose, right? They are a top team, and it's always a toss-up, in those kind of games, and anything can happen. And the Cowboys got within 3, of that game, but the defense chose the wrong time not to be able to stop anyone. So, when the Cowboys were 3 points after being down 27-9 at some point, and they now go within 3 of the Lions, I was thinking, oh, we could win this. This is looking like, Cowboys for the last couple of weeks, but it wasn't meant to be. And that can happen. The Lions are a good team. So what realistically needs to happen now is, because the Eagles are 2 games ahead of the Cowboys, the Eagles need to just go 2-2. If they go 2-2, the Cowboys are in, right? And they can take that division. Now, if you look at the schedule, for the Eagles have got the Raiders next, get right game. But the Raiders, have shown that, they can take teams to the brink, right? Their last game, they only lost it by 4 points. And you could think that they could be playing spoilers, right? So you just but let's say that the Eagles win that game, right? Then they've got what I consider three difficult games. They've got the Commanders, and then they've got the Bills, and then they've got the Commanders. Two games against a division opponent. Now, it doesn't help when you play these teams in very close proximity, right? You would expect one of those games to be a lot more competitive than the other. Now, sometimes it's the first one that they play, right? Where you can almost take the soul out of the team if you pummel them, or if we keep it close, they're going to be thinking, what, in the next one, we could actually do something. So if the Eagles lose one of those divisional games, and we expect them to lose to the Bills, because I think the Bills are catching fire at the right point in time, that brings them 2-2. The Cowboys now need to win against the Vikings this weekend. They then need to beat the Chargers. Then they have the Commanders and the Giants. And Dak Prescott notoriously is good against NFC divisions, opponents. So the Cowboys have got a chance.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it. I think this weekend is going to tell. If the Cowboys don't win against the Vikings, then it's a wrap, right? You might as well, call it done.
Yeah, they need to get one of those games back. Need to get one of the games back quickly. I think for me, I think this kind of shows. We've talked about it before that you need a strong defense to become close to being a really good football team, because you're relying too much on your offense. And you say Prescott always brings against the NFC. This wasn't the best day for Dak Prescott. Really, if you look at it, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, sacked 5 times. Right. He had a high completion percentage, but you can't always rely on Prescott. You can't rely on any quarterback to keep pulling it out week after week after week when you've got a defense who is going to give away 40 points. Right. Yeah. But Detroit Lions are a good team. They've had a disappointing season by the standards they set for themselves last season, but they're still in playoff contention. So look, you can lose these types of games. But next week is going to be telling. I think you're either going to be well within a shot of making the playoffs or completely out of it.
Yes.
So, but between you and the Eagles, one team is generally having an upwards trajectory. One of them is certainly having a downwards trajectory. And I know which hat I would rather be wearing at the moment. And it's not one with the Eagles on it. But let's move on in the NFC, because I think one of the biggest games of the weekend was the Packers and the Bears in the NFC North. I mean, we've talked about the NFC North being such a tight division, with the Packers, Bears, and Lions all within a chance of making that top seed. It was the Packers who came out on top. I'm just trying to get the score in front of me because I've forgotten what the score was, because I am super professional. Yes, 28-21. This was a big game. The Packers, you talk about a team catching fire at the moment. This is a Packers team catching fire at exactly the right time. They go top of division. They shoot up from, I think they were pretty much on the bubble to being the second seed now in the NFC, whereas the Bears, bless them, had gone from being number 1 seed all the way down now to number 7. It just shows how a really tight division can throw all sorts of spanners in the works when it comes to the playoff race. But I mean, I don't know if how closely you felt this game, Eddie, but what are your views on this and the repercussions of it?
Yeah, I did, because I'm keeping an eye on Micah Parsons.
You're basically like a lovesick teenager following his ex-girlfriend on Facebook. Oh, I see she's got a new man. I wonder how she's getting on. Her new boyfriend looks a lot better looking than me. Oh, he's got more muscle. He's a lot stronger looking than me. Oh dear. I'll still follow him for bikini pictures anyway.
I don't know how you know this much detail.
Oh, I'm talking from experience. That's why.
Yeah, listen, Micah Parsons is for real. I watched the Packers game, and I love what I saw, and for me, I don't think this is a bad loss for the Bears. I think this is one that it should do nothing to affect the confidence that they've built in the last couple of weeks because they've been incredible. They've been, beat the Eagles, and absolutely stumped the Eagles. Let's not even say beat the Eagles. They stumped the Eagles. But the Packers have always been a good team, and from the start of the season, I think most people would have looked at that Packers and say they've got a good defense. Obviously, with Micah Parsons getting added there, now can the offense just hold up? Can the offense play complementary football? Can Jordan Love not throw the ball away? And to be fair, up until the last game, I think he only had 2 or so interceptions or 3 interceptions in the whole season. So he's keeping his own side of the bargain, not giving the ball away, just playing efficient football. And sometimes that's what you need, right? You need a dominant, side of the field. And you watch this game and you can see Micah Parsons, just showing up, causing havoc, all the time. The Bears could have won this game. There's no question about that. It was a very close game. It went down to the fourth quarter in terms of the Packers, but they needed just one stop, and that was what the Bears couldn't do. And they took the worst time, to turn the ball over. To the Packers, and not all turnovers are equal, right? When you turn the ball in the first quarter, you can get around it. If you turn the ball in the fourth quarter, that's almost curtains, for the team. So I think the Packers will go on strong. I think the Bears are going to make the playoffs. I think they're going to get back. They're going to win their next game. This game was always going to be a tough one, for them, just because of the opponent and the circumstances and everything. But it was a really good game. It was a great advert for the NFL. If you love exciting football, tension-filled football, this was the one, to watch. But yeah, I think both teams are going to potentially meet again in the playoffs at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's the oldest game in American football. And these two teams have a long storied rivalry, and it was a game that certainly delivered. And I think the NFC North it's such an intriguing division, as of the NFC West, and obviously we'll come on to that later. You've got all 3 teams with winning records who can all make the playoffs. You got said Packers are second seeds as it stands, Bears 7th, and the Lions are 8th. So there's still a chance all 3 teams could still make it. And I imagine 3 teams from either the NFC West or the NFC North will make the playoffs. And the next weekend's going to be an interesting one again. The Bears, you've said, we'll take shouldn't be too devastated by this victory per se. They've got the easiest game on paper. They play Cleveland, who again side with nothing to play for. The Lions play the LA Rams, who are currently top seeds, and the Packers played Denver, who are
Broncos,
looking very, very strong in the AFC. So we could be in a situation when we're sitting down next week, although obviously we might not be sitting down next week, as we said. But next time we talk again, it could be completely different, and we could find the Bears up into second seed. But let's move on to the next division we want to touch on, and I say touch on because we're literally going to say this game happened. And that's the NFC South. The Buccaneers and the Panthers both at 7-6. Panthers had a bye week. The Buccaneers lost. This is just this is a division where the Bucs, obviously they've only lost 1 game, but they've been on a slide. They haven't been consistent. The Panthers look good, and for them it was a bit of a surprise package as well. They could make the playoffs, but I think in all likelihood, whichever one team gets through here, they'll probably be one and done. Not a huge amount to say in the NFC South, unless there's anything you want to say. We'll move on.
No, there's nothing. I mean, the Bucs are, they're a bit of a disappointment. And when you lose to a team like the New Orleans Saints, who are eliminated from the playoffs, not going anywhere at all. I get it that they are division opponents, and maybe sometimes that's what it is, right? That's why you look at these division games and it creates jeopardy. And I'm sure this is why the NFL have done this. They've made sure that there's a couple of division games, towards the home stretch, right? Everybody's playing a division game in the last couple of games, for exactly this reason, because it doesn't matter what the record is. A team is capable of beating another team, just because they're in the same division. And I think that's what's happening to the Bucks as well. But yeah, this game there wasn't much to see here.
No, the Bucks, they need to be beating teams like the Saints, who went into the game 2-10. Need to be beating them at home. But let's move on to the NFC West. And as we mentioned, this is a league where potentially you've got three teams potentially all going for the playoffs. You've got the Rams, the Seahawks, and the 49ers all won their respective games. If I can just pull them up here. So you got the Seahawks, dominated the Falcons 39-7. We had where they gone? The Rams beating the Cardinals 45-17. And I think the 49ers were off for the week, weren't they? I think they had a bye. But again, very, very strong division. And I think we start with the Rams. Surprising defeat the weekend before, but they came back with in some style in Arizona, completely wiped the floor of them really. And Stafford was back to his best, and he is probably, if not the best player in the NFL at the moment, he is the one that right now you would feel most confident in having your team who can pull a victory out. 22 out of 31 completions, 281 yards, 3 touchdowns. So last weekend when he was throwing picks, he's come back, and this is a really good get right game for them.
Yeah, it was. But Stafford hadn't thrown a pick. I think when we're doing that preview, we was kind of talking. Was it like 27 consecutive touchdowns?
Oh, it was more than that. It was 48 or something stupid, and he hadn't done anything since like for an interceptions week 4 or whatever it was. Just unreal form.
So he knew at some point, and maybe sometimes you just want to get that over with, and because as it gets closer and closer, you start to become more and more aware of what you've done, and sometimes it adds a little bit more pressure. So I think now you get that out of the way, and now you can play your game. I think the Rams, I think we know what the Rams are now. A very good team with a very good coach and a very good quarterback. That's what you need to go into the playoffs and make a deep run. And they have that. A coach that has been to the playoffs so many times, been to the Super Bowl, a couple of times, lost one, won one. And so he knows how to get there, so very clearly you can see that they are heating up just right about the right time. And see, they lost to the Panthers, but it wasn't like the Panthers blew them away. That game, was decided by 3 points, basically. So they could have won that game if things swung in their direction, but they lost. But they came back to show against a team that's not so good that we don't play around with our food. We just get straight to it. So yeah, they have the same record as the Seattle Seahawks, who are quietly, winning games. And you see, when I look at these two teams, in one way, I actually trust, the Rams more than the Seahawks.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Seahawks, have been, a victim of schedule. In terms of, the games that they've had to play, they've not really had a tough schedule, right? I mean, if you look at other than the division games, that they've had, they've played the New Orleans, Arizona Cardinals, they played the Jaguars when the Jaguars were in their hot streak, the Commanders, it helps when you play the Cardinals twice, because, that helps. Tennessee, the Vikings, the Falcons, Pittsburgh Steelers early on, when they were clueless, probably still clueless at this point in time. So you can kind of look at that schedule and you kind of say to the Seahawks, okay, they're 10-3, but are they a respectable 10-3? I mean, so out of those two teams, I look at the Rams and I say, yeah, I don't want to meet the Rams, at all. But you might want to take your chance with the Seahawks. But
yeah,
they're gonna make the playoffs, both of them.
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, as I said, I've said this for a while. I think that the Rams are looking great. I mean, at the moment, it's between Rams and the Packers for the best team in the NFC as it stands at the moment. I think that the Rams certainly have the best quarterback. So they've got Puka Nakua's looking good. I mean, so yeah, I mean, look, they look solid, and I think they'd be in a really good shout. And whereas obviously Packers, for example, we're relying a lot on the defense, but we got Jordan Love's looking sharp as well. I think next week's going to be quite interesting to see how things go next week, because you look at those three teams, you look at in the NFC West, you look at the Rams, you look at the Seahawks, and also you look at the 49ers. Currently, all three teams are in the playoff picture as it stands. It's definitely the Rams have got the hardest next game, right? So they play Detroit, right, which we talked about. We've talked about the Lions. They're still very much in the playoff hunt, whereas the Seahawks and the 49ers play teams who are in not the best of shapes at the moment. So the Seahawks play the Colts, and we'll talk about the Colts shortly. And the 49ers play the Tennessee Titans. So the Seahawks and the 49ers should be going into those games are coming out with W's for both of those. So that would take the Seahawks to 11-3, 49ers to 10-4. I still think that, I mean, I'll still put money on the Rams. So like you, I trust the Rams more than I trust the Seahawks and I trust the 49ers. But I still think there's a lot of up and down to go. I don't think the Rams are guaranteed that number one spot just yet. But before we move on to the AFC, quick question, simple question. Who in the NFC is going to the Super Bowl? I'm going to ask you this every week.
Yeah, I know. What did I say last time?
To be honest, I can't remember what I said.
I can't remember what I said, but I have a feeling that I went with the Rams, which is the team that I'm going. I think you went with the Packers because you've chosen them for a while now.
Yeah, I did, and that's I'm still sticking with the Packers for now. I'm thinking of Packers playoffs, but then Stafford MVP.
Yeah, just keep space for me in that bandwagon because I might be jumping back.
Eddie, I can always squeeze you onto any bandwagon, mate. Absolutely.
I might be jumping back very soon. See, I'm even wearing Packers green today.
You fickle bastard. Right. All right, well, let's move on. Let's move on to the AFC, and let's see if we can do this before my laptop dies of battery. I've got 16% left, so I've used half my battery since I've started this. And let's start. We'll start with the game of the day, game of the weekend in the AFC, and that was the Bills and the Bengals. This was an absolute thrill ride. That kind of all pinned on two pretty bizarre back-to-back interceptions that Joe Burrow threw, one being a pick six, and it allowed the Bills just to run away with it in the fourth quarter. Finished 39-34, but these were two of the best quarterbacks in the game going toe-to-toe. Burrows looks good since he's come back. I said Bengals are now probably out of the playoff picture if they're not officially out of the playoff picture. But the Bills are starting to look good. Now, we've just talked about Matthew Stafford being one of the most informed players that plays you trust the most in the NFL. But still, if you ask me who is the best player in the NFL, it's still number 17 at Buffalo Bills. And he just came out and he stood up. And he brought it home for Buffalo, and he didn't he?
He did. The Bills are a team that nobody's going to want to play in the wild card because I think that's how they're going to get in. Mm-hmm. I think the Patriots have got a foothold in that division. Although when you kind of look at it, the Bills, are not that far away. For the Patriots to lose, two more games, the way that they are playing, I think it's a real stretch. They
Yeah,
probably
it's not going to happen.
yeah, I think they probably got one loss in them. I can't see two. So yeah, the Bills are a decent. That game, I was watching the game and I was like, oh, I've forgotten that the Bills, they play in a frozen parts of the country. Because that game was, in my head, I was just thinking like, how do you play games like that? Like, as a player, when it's cold, freezing, negative degrees, how are you able to like run on the pitch, with all that snow going on? And of course, I know they wear the right equipment and all of that, but it's just fascinating. Sometimes when I watch this kind of games, I'm watching for like, those blooper moments, to kind of see who's gonna like trip and fall, who's gonna try to, catch the ball and then it spills and all of that. But they were playing, like I said, they were playing on normal grass. But yeah, coming back to the game, the interceptions were unexplainable. Because he was playing quite well, he was giving it as much as they were getting from the Bills. But sometimes teams that are used to playing in this kind of weather just always have the edge, right? Nobody wants to go to Lambeau Field, in the playoff because it's most likely going to be cold. Same thing with the Bills. Nobody wants to go there, as well. So, but I think the Bills' offense has been, gathering momentum for the last couple of weeks, and so you're getting. And I said this last time that George Allen will be looking at this and saying there are no Chiefs, potentially no Lamar. If you're looking at all the quarterbacks that are now, getting into the playoffs, if you're thinking about Bo Nix, you're thinking about Drake May, you're thinking about Trevor Lawrence, these are all the teams, that are currently sitting, in that playoff, position. Maybe Aaron Rodgers, you're kind of thinking, but you don't just know what Aaron Rodgers is going to show up. The Chargers, you got Justin Herbert, right? Texans, you got CJ Stroud. So you kind of look at that and say, out of all of these teams, I don't know if I'm going to be picking any of them above Josh Allen, going into the playoffs. So he's going to be looking at himself and saying, if I'm ever going to get to the Super Bowl, this is the year. This is the year that I get it done. And I think they're going to be so focused, on that. So yeah, I think the Bengals are done. They had the bounce with Joe Burrow coming back, but that bounce wasn't going to last long. So yeah, it was a predictable outcome.
No, I think it's just the one word I will say on the Bengals. The reason why they're not quite out of it just yet is their next game is against the Ravens, right? So beat the Ravens, have one game behind them, but they're 3 games behind the Steelers, right? We'll look at the AFC North in a little bit, shortly, because obviously the Steelers beat the Ravens, but that's not a strong division. We know only one team are going through that. The Bengals need to pick up 3 games on the Steelers, and that's possible because the Steelers aren't particularly strong at the moment. But I agree. I think the Bengals are done. But yeah, you look at the AFC, and I genuinely think the AFC is the weaker conference this year.
Yeah.
You look at, we've talked about in the NFC, there's 3 teams in the West who are looking good. There's 3 teams in the North, I think it's who are looking good. Could all make the playoffs. Here it's just, yeah, you've got the South, the Patriots and the Bills are looking good. The Jaguars and the Texans in the South, and almost much has been fair play to them to get there, but looking good. But they're certainly not one of the upper echelons of the size, I think it's fair to say. and the Broncos are just 1-0 to the Arsenal all the way to the playoffs at the moment. So I mean, you would look at it and think that this should be Alan's year to get to the playoffs. And to get to the Super Bowl. And once you're at the Super Bowl, who knows, right? I would love to see a shootout between Stafford and Allen in the Super Bowl. That would be hilarious to watch. I still think the Buffalo Bills, and I'm going to ask you the question obviously later, but which team is going there? But I still think who's going to Super Bowl in the AFC. I still think it's the Bills. They've got the quarterback who you want leading that team going into it. And what's going to be really interesting, who are they playing next week? They're playing the Patriots. So they're 2 games behind. They beat the Patriots. They put a marker down. They're only one game behind. So I think the Bills are certainly playoff bound. But I just want to touch on this. I just want to touch on this a little bit. I do want to move on because we've got a few other bits we want to get through. Now, before we recorded, you wanted to talk about the Dolphins for some reason. You wanted to talk about the Dolphins beating the Jets. Because we are, Dolphin fan myself, we are we're on a 4-game winning streak. How the bloody hell did that happen? You said, you can still make the playoffs. Now, according to the NFL's website, we have a 1% chance of making the playoffs. Now, are you honestly telling me that there is a chance that the Dolphins can make the playoffs?
I'm just saying that mathematically you guys are not out of it. Not completely, right? So I mean, you've had a good win against the Bills, right? Nobody saw that coming. But a win
we did not see that coming.
It's a win is a win, right? You take it, right? And if I look at what your schedule, is saying, right, you're currently, 6 and 7, right? The same, record as the Steelers, same record, as the Ravens. These are all teams that are ahead of you in the standings, and that's by virtue of their division rather than anything else. Now it's probably ridiculous to think that there will be 3 teams making it out of the AFC East. Maybe that's why what I'm about to say doesn't make any logical sense. However, I still think that you could finish the season, 10 and 7, right? And if you finish the season 10 and 7, I mean, you've also got to look at the AFC West, where you've got the Kansas City Chiefs, who are most likely not going to make the playoffs. And then you've got the other team that is there. You've got the Raiders are out of it. The Chargers, you never know. The Chargers have got some, tough games coming. One, they're playing the Kansas City Chiefs in their next game, and then they play the Cowboys, right? If you guys win those 2 games, right, you might be, on the same record, as well, not the same record, but 1 game behind the Chargers, right? So I mean, it's all still possible, right? I know that as long as it's mathematically possible, I think, like we've said with the NFC, this weekend is going to be key for a lot of teams, right? If you lose this weekend, you might as well just scrap this whole segment.
Oh yeah, no, I don't worry. I'm going to take this video. I'm going to make this particular clip a video, because the one thing I will say, you said it's mathematically possible. You are right. In football here in the UK, I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan. We currently sit bottom of our division with -9 points, right? -9 points. Now, mathematically, there is still a chance we could make the playoffs and even win the league, but it's not going to happen, right? It is not going to happen, no matter what mathematics is still there. Look, I'm pleased the Dolphins are doing well, or turn things around and show sign of life, but unfortunately, it's going to be a bit too little, too late for this season. But I appreciate your positivity, Eddie. It's much appreciated. But look, beating the New York Jets isn't something to really write home about. But hey ho, we move on. So yeah, let's move on. And look, let's just spend 1 minute just to acknowledge it a little bit more in the AFC North, because the Steelers and the Ravens crunch game. We said this was going to be a crunch game. It was the Steelers who won. They're top the division now at 7-6. Obviously, fourth seed in the playoffs now as it stands. But this kind of does feel like a tallest dwarf competition, doesn't it? You know, it's the same as we've seen in the NFC South. Sorry, I mean, only one of these teams are going for it. The Ravens just look a shadow of their former selves, don't they?
They look lost. They look lost. I don't think Lamar Jackson is fit. I think
No.
he's carrying some injury. He's I watched that game and he was taking sacks, and I was just thinking, this is not the Lamar Jackson that I know, that is always shifty, always looking to extend the play and all of that. It just looked like he wanted out of the game, very, very quickly. So yeah, the Ravens are not right. And sometimes for some of these teams, it's almost ridiculous to think that they limp out and not make the playoffs, right? And it's the same sort of thing that's happening with the Chiefs. There is a bit of a disconnection with, how good the team can be and the reality of where they are in the league this season. And I think the Ravens, yeah, I don't see them, getting to the playoffs, and I don't even see that if they manage to get in. I don't see them doing much. I think they will be one and done.
Yeah, I'm the same. Same with the Steelers as well. Last week you had the fans chanting to fire Mike Tomlin. They're making the playoffs again, as it looks, but I can't see them. I mean, obviously they're going to go in as probably as fourth seed, whoever comes out the top of the AFC North, but doesn't look particularly good for them. But let's quickly move on to the AFC South. Let's touch again briefly on this division, because there's another big game in this division. But we can talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, who sit top of the division. We can talk about the Houston Texans, who continue their impressive streak. They've won 5 on the bounce now. Sort of come from nowhere, wasn't it? They were 3-5 not so long ago, assuming their season is over, but now they're well within a shout. But let's talk about the team who were at the beginning of the season were the team to beat. Top of the division. You said probably peaked too early, and now they've lost 3 on a bounce and are now out of the playoff picture as it stands. And that's the Indianapolis Colts. It just keeps going from bad to worse for them. Lost their quarterback. Daniel Jones is probably going to be out for the season, we think, with an Achilles injury. They have dug up Phillip Rivers to come and play in their practice squad. It's not looking great. They don't have a quarterback at the moment, and without a quarterback, you're unlikely to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a good story, with the Colts. They lost their honor. There was a change in ownership and all of that, and it felt like they were now having that, that season that you kind of look back in the history books and saying, what a run. People, no one took them, any seriously when they were stacking up the wins, and everyone was like, there's a famous meme that people like to use, especially for Arsenal, where they have this elephant that's sitting on top of the tree, and then there's just this description, of we don't know how the elephant got to the top of the tree, but we do know that it's for coming down very quickly. And I think the Colts just strike that sort of picture. I think no one knew how they got to be in the number 1 seed position, and they were sitting there for a very long time. But this is where experience comes in. Having a team that have been able to navigate the playoffs, and things like that, but they've just hit the wrong time of the season to have a poor form. You now compound that with losing your quarterback. It doesn't go well. I think that they might not win a game again before the end of the season. That's how bad that's looking, which would be a huge shame, for a season that promised so much, but now is delivering very little.
No, absolutely, and it's it is a massive shame for them. It's a massive shame for Daniel Jones, who has looked really good beginning of the season, surprised a lot of people. First, when he was given the job as starting quarterback over Richardson, but yeah, it's a shame that their season is going to end out and with a whimper. I assume they're still going to pay Jones because obviously he's only signed a 1-year deal. They're obviously not going to get anywhere near anything. They're going to be sort of middle of the pack when it comes to the draft. So they're not going to draft high for a quarterback. So I imagine he'll still get paid for next year. But yeah, it's a shame for the Colts. It's also a shame for the AFC for you wanting a playoff if you're wanting a playoff race, because I agree. I don't. 4 games left. Their next game's against Seahawks. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't win another game. And at the moment, in the sort of on the bubble in the playoff race, they're the only team on the bubble with a winning record in the AFC. Right.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how sort of desperate that division, this conference is going to be looking for a playoff race where realistically it's only going to be if it's going to be Ravens or the Steelers, when it comes to any sort of playoff drama, unless, as you've very let's say optimistically said, that the Dolphins are going to come roaring back into contention, which I would like to see. But let's talk about the team let's not talk about teams replacing them just yet. Let's just give some flowers to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are now top that division after his win. And the Jaguars are looking good. Lawrence has come back in with some form. After a few shaky moments this season, and I don't see them going particularly far in the playoffs, but they are where they deserve to be at the moment. They're the 3rd seed, and I think they're almost a shoo-in. Their next game is against the New York Jets, so that's a guaranteed W. So yeah, I think they go into the playoffs with lots of confidence, and they never looked like losing this game, did they?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was more about the Colts than it was about the Jaguars. I don't know what to make of the Jaguars. I saw them up close and personal in London, and they didn't exactly fill me with a lot of confidence when they got absolutely pummeled by the Rams in that game in London. So obviously they've improved since then, and they've picked up a little bit of form. But I call them tricky customers. I think that if they made a true heavyweight, they will lie on the floor and get tickled. I think it was more about the Colts. The Colts are just in a bad form, and the Colts will lose to, a team that we've assembled, right now. No disrespect to all of them who are NFL players, but they're just in a bad way. So yeah, fair play to the Jaguars. They're gonna get into the playoffs, but I think just like you say, but the AFC is such a weak conference, I think, this year. So you just never know. You catch a team at a bad time, and hey, you might just be able to do something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But let's talk about the other team now who kind of replaced the Colts in the playoff standing at the moment, and that is the Houston Texans, who, again, there's sort of 2 stories in this game that we're going to talk about next. One is the fact that the Houston's obviously continue their fantastic run of form. They've got themselves to the playoffs, and they did that by beating the Kansas City Chiefs, who it's fair to say it has to be over for them now, isn't it? In the AFC West, they currently sit 3rd in their division. Doesn't look good. Patrick Mahomes, 160 yards, 3 interceptions, 0 touchdowns. Not particularly good look. 3 quarters without scoring any points at all. All their points came, I think, in the 3rd quarter. This has got to be their race run in the playoffs of this season.
Yeah, right. I think this is one of those games where you kind of knew what was happening, and you just pray for mercy. It's like, you see, someone that was that good. It's like, like when you see those kind of, retired boxers, who've done it all, and then they're going back for one more match, and in between the match, you just kind of think, oh, let's just put them out of their misery, right? Because, they're giving it, as much as they can, but they're not the same boxer that they were, and probably shouldn't have gotten into the ring. I just, I, 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 I know people have this mystique about the Chiefs, and we are all a victim of that. We just cannot shake off. This is the team that has gone to like seven, playoffs in the last couple of years, and gone to the Super Bowl, ridiculous amount of time, and won so many. And it's just like you cannot disconnect yourself from that team. But the reality is that this is not that team, and I think it's probably better for them to just, I don't know if it's worse for them to get into the playoffs and then absolutely get shellacked by a team, and just leave the playoffs, even worse than it is. So yeah, I don't see them making up the games. I know that there are people that are saying, oh, they can win out, and the Chargers will have to collapse. They've got the same situation, a little bit like what the Cowboys have, right? They need the Chargers to collapse for them to get in, right? And that starts with this weekend. So if they beat the Chargers, maybe they might have a pulse, because then the Chargers playing the Cowboys next, and if the Cowboys beat the Chargers, then it's like, ooh, okay. But I don't think that, even that would help them, because I think that the Chargers will need to lose to the Broncos as well, for the Chiefs to be able to get in. So if the Chargers are losing to the Chiefs and then lose to the Cowboys, but win the remaining games, the Chiefs are not getting in. So the Chiefs need the Chargers to lose to the Broncos, as well, in order for them to get in. It's a tall order, because you don't know what the Broncos are going to be potentially doing at that point in time in the season. They might be putting their feet up because they're firmly, in the playoffs, and there's nothing for them to really play for. So
Yeah, well, that's why I think that the percentage chance of the Chiefs actually making the playoffs is as high as it is. And when I say as high as it is, 12%, right? um, I think this is just a season you have to kind of just write off and go again. The Chiefs have got questions to ask for next year. Mainly is Travis Kelce going to be playing for them next year? This is a team that obviously the way the NFL is basically set up, it's not set up for dynasties to be built over 4, 5, 6 years, consistent Super Bowl runs. That's not how the NFL is positioned. And the one thing I would just say that what I really like about this season, right? You've talked about that the Chiefs aren't going to get there. We've talked about the Ravens aren't going to get there. You look at the teams in the playoffs at the moment. You've got the Broncos, Patriots, Jaguars, Steelers, Chargers, Bills, Texans. There's quite a lot of sort of exciting teams within this. A lot of like a few sort of new faces to go with the likes of, say, the Patriots, who, the Patriots are a new team to the playoffs, I suppose, in the last couple of years.
yeah.
The Steelers have always been there or thereabouts, but they're not looking great. Obviously, the Bills are there, but in a wild card position. And then in the NFC, obviously, you've got a lot of exciting teams in there as well, but a few more, say, traditional playoff teams. So I'll ask you the same question just quickly before my laptop does die. AFC Super Bowl contenders. Who's going to play the Rams then?
I like the way the Bills are going, but I think for this week, I'm going to go with the Bills. But I think it depends on what happens this weekend. if they get shellacked by the Patriots, I'm going to be switching.
Oh no, I'm still going for the Bills. I'm still going for the Bills.
Even
But look,
even if they get beaten by the Patriots, it depends
yeah,
on. I mean, if they lose badly to the Patriots, I mean, if they lose by, a touchdown and a field goal equivalent, so they lose by 10 points.
I think so. I
You
mean,
still
look, playoff.
you're gonna
I
have
still,
confidence in the Bills.
yeah, I'd say so. I mean, look, regulars. You've got to remember this is a team over the past few years who beat the Chiefs every single season, but then lose them in the playoffs. Playoff football just hits different, doesn't it? Right. So,
It's
but look,
true.
anyway, let's wrap it up there. We have just ticked over to the hour mark right this second. How's that for timing? My laptop has got like 4% battery left, so I do need to jump off now. Eddie, obviously, we're not entirely sure how we're going to be recording the next few episodes because of obviously over the festive period. We might be in and out of episodes, but we will see. But Eddie, pleasure as always talking to you about this NFL action. Sorry for everyone for the lateness of getting this up. But Eddie, for week 14, please take us home.
Yes, week 14. This is the home stretch now. It's do or die now for a lot of teams, and we will be putting a few more X's over a couple of teams by the end of this weekend. So week 15 is coming. Like Matt said, we'll try and bring you as much content as we can, over the Christmas period. But please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. That's basically oxygen for us. So we do appreciate that as well. And leave a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you guys think about, what we've talked about. And, week 15 is promising to be very, very good. I might be wearing black because maybe the Cowboys are completely out by then, or I might be wearing the color of a team that we might need to be doing us a favor to kind of get us in. So you might have to tune in to find out how that's going to look. But until we see you guys again, take care.
It's all right.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the